Hey guys, tonight you're going to experience what it was really like to be Napoleon Bonaparte. Not the legend, not the emperor from the paintings, but the actual person who lived this life, felt these pressures and made these impossible choices. Most people imagine Napoleon's life as pure glory, military genius, emperor of France, conqueror of Europe, one of the most powerful men who ever lived. But the reality is being Napoleon meant waking up every day knowing half of Europe wanted you dead, that your own family was draining your empire dry, and that one military mistake could erase everything you built. We're talking about surviving on 4 hours of sleep while managing wars on 5 fronts, watching hundreds of thousands of your soldiers freeze to death in Russia, and dying alone on a rock in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, slowly poisoned, with only a handful of loyalists who couldn't save you. So tonight, we're going to walk through his life from the moment he was born on an island that didn't even want to be French, to his final breath in exile, abandoned by almost everyone. Now get comfortable, close your eyes, and let's step into Corsica in 1769. You're born on August 15th, 1769, in Ajaccio, Corsica. Your name is Napoleone di Bonaparte. Notice that spelling. Napoleone Bonaparte. Italian, not French. Because Corsica isn't really French yet, not in any meaningful way. Here's the thing nobody tells you about your birth. Corsica was sold to France just 1 year before you were born. Sold, like property. By the Republic of Genoa, who couldn't hold the island anymore because Corsican rebels kept fighting for independence. Your father, Carlo Bonaparte, was actually fighting with those rebels. Fighting against France, against the country you'll one day rule. Then France wins, the rebellion collapses, and your father, being a practical man, switches sides. He becomes a supporter of the French occupation, a collaborator, because that's how you survive when the winning side has all the power. This choice will define your childhood. You're Corsican by birth, by culture, by language, but legally, technically, you're French. And neither side will ever let you forget it. Your family is noble, but barely. Your father has a fancy title, but almost no money. Your mother, Letizia, is tough as iron. She'll have 13 children total, though only 8 survive. You're the second surviving son, which means you're not the heir. Your older brother Joseph gets that honour. You're the spare, the backup, the one who needs to figure out his own path. Your house in Ajaccio is decent but not grand. Your father is always scrambling for money, always networking, always trying to leverage his new connections with the French authorities to get advantages for the family. He's teaching you a lesson you'll never forget. Loyalty is fluid. Power is what matters, and survival means adapting. Corsica is beautiful. Rocky, coastline, mountains, Mediterranean sun. But it's also poor, violent and stuck between cultures. The Corsicans speak their own language, Italian basically, and they hate the French occupiers. The French look down on Corsicans as backwards, primitive, barely civilized. You're caught in the middle. Too French for the Corsicans, too Corsican for the French. When you're 9 years old, your father uses his connections to get you and Joseph scholarships to French schools. You're being sent away to France, to the mainland, to learn to be French, even though you barely speak the language. In December 1778, you leave Corsica. You'll see your island again only a handful of times in your life. This is the first wound, the first separation. You're 9 years old, leaving your mother, your home, your language, your culture, to go to a country that sees you as foreign and inferior. You arrive at a religious school in autumn first to learn French. You struggle. Your accent is thick. Your classmates mock you. They call you the little Corsican. They make fun of how you talk, how you look, your name. Napoleone sounds ridiculous to them. Foreign. Weak. You learn to fight. Not physically, though you'll do that too, but mentally. You learn to endure humiliation, to keep your face blank while inside you're burning, to remember every insult, every slight, and file it away for later. After a few months, you're sent to a military school in Brienne. This is where the real torture begins. You're 10 years old. The school is for sons of nobility, but most of these boys are from rich families. Old French families with estates and titles that go back centuries. You're Corsican. Your family is noble by technicality. Your father is scrambling to pay bills. The other boys sense this immediately. Kids are cruel, and aristocratic kids are especially cruel. They mock your accent constantly. You still speak French with a heavy Corsican accent. You'll have this accent your entire life. Even as Emperor of France, you'll speak French like a foreigner. They mock your poverty. You can't afford the same clothes, the same supplies, the same luxuries as the other boys. They mock your name, Napoleone Bonaparte. It's too long, too Italian, too foreign. They mispronounce it on purpose. They laugh when you correct them. You withdraw. You stop trying to make friends. Instead, you read. You devour books. History, mathematics, geography, military theory. You're not naturally charming like your brother Joseph. You're not smooth or social. You're awkward, intense, and angry. But you're smart. Brilliant, actually. You realise that if you can't be liked, you can be respected. If you can't fit in, you can excel. The school is harsh. Cold stone buildings, bad food, strict discipline. You sleep in an unheated dormitory. You study for hours every day. Math, Latin, German, history, fortification, artillery. The curriculum is designed to produce military officers, and you absorb everything. But you're lonely. Desperately lonely. You write letters home constantly, especially to your older brother Joseph, who's at a different school. You pour out your feelings to him. How much you hate France, how much you miss Corsica, how much you want to go home. You start to romanticize Corsica in your mind. You weren't happy there either, but at least you belonged, at least you were home. You develop a fantasy. You'll go back to Corsica. You'll join the independence movement. You'll fight for Corsican freedom from France. You'll be a hero to your people. This fantasy sustains you through years of isolation and mockery. You spend 5 years at Brienne. 5 years of being the outsider, the foreigner, the poor kid, the weird intense one who reads all the time and never smiles. You graduate in 1784 at age 15. Your final report notes that you're reserved, studious, and prefer mathematics to social interaction. You're recommended for the artillery, which is considered a technical branch, less prestigious than cavalry or infantry, but perfect for someone good with numbers. You're accepted to the military academy in Paris, the École Militaire. This should be an honour. It is an honour. But you know you only got in because your father worked his connections and because someone felt sorry for the poor Corsican kid. Your father dies in February 1785. You're 15. He dies of stomach cancer, painfully, slowly. You don't get to say goodbye. You're in Paris. He's in France, but too far away. You get a letter telling you he's dead. Just like that, your father is gone. This devastates you. Your father was flawed. He was a social climber, a collaborator, maybe even a sellout. But he was your father. He got you into these schools. He was trying to give you opportunities. And now he's dead. And your family's even poorer than before. Your brother Joseph, as the eldest, becomes the head of the family. But you're the one at the military school. You're the one with the career prospects. You feel the weight of responsibility. You need to graduate. You need to get a commission. You need to start earning money to send home to your mother and siblings. You graduate in September 1785, after just 1 year instead of the usual 2 or 3. You're in a hurry. Your family needs you. You're commissioned as a second lieutenant in an artillery regiment. You're 16 years old. You're an officer in the French army, the army that conquered your homeland, the army you once fantasized about fighting against. The irony isn't lost on you. You've spent your whole childhood being told you're not really French, that you're foreign, that you don't belong, and now you're supposed to defend France, serve France, maybe die for France. You're assigned to a garrison in Valence. It's boring. Peacetime military service is mind-numbing. You drill, you study, you wait. You're desperately poor. Your salary is tiny, and you send most of it home. You live in cheap lodgings. You eat cheap food. You can't afford a social life, even if you wanted one. But you read constantly. You're educating yourself in everything. You read Rousseau, Voltaire, ancient historians, military theorists. You're forming opinions about politics, about society, about power. You're angry at the aristocracy, at their privilege, at the unfairness of a system where birth matters more than ability. You go back to Corsica on leave whenever possible. You're trying to help your family, trying to figure out how to improve their situation. You also get involved in Corsican politics. You still have this romantic notion that Corsica should be independent. You write essays about Corsican history and identity. You think maybe you can be a Corsican patriot after all. But Corsica is changing. The French grip is tightening. And your family, whether you like it or not, is aligned with the French side. Your future is with France, not against it. Then, in 1789, everything changes. The French Revolution begins. The Bastille falls. The king loses power. The whole social order of France starts collapsing. The aristocrats who mocked you at school are suddenly targets. The old rules don't apply anymore. This is your moment. You're 20 years old. You're an artillery officer with no connections, no money, and no future in the old system. But the old system is dying. In chaos, there's opportunity. You return to Corsica in 1789. The revolution has emboldened Corsican nationalists. There's a leader named Pasquale Paoli, a legendary figure who fought against France for years and was exiled. He's allowed to return. He's a hero. And you're starstruck. You try to get close to Paoli. You offer your services. You think you can serve both Corsica and the revolution. But Paoli doesn't trust you. Your family supported France. You're a French officer. And honestly, you're too intense, too ambitious, too obviously hungry for power. Paoli sees right through you. You spend the next few years bouncing between Corsica and France. You're trying to figure out where you belong. You're involved in Corsican politics, but you're getting nowhere. Paoli and his supporters see you as French. The French see you as Corsican. You're stuck in between again. Then it falls apart completely. Paoli breaks with revolutionary France and declares Corsican independence. You and your family are forced to choose. You choose France. Not because you love France, but because Paoli has rejected you, because your future isn't in Corsica, and because, frankly, France is where the opportunities are. Paoli's supporters force your family to flee Corsica in 1793. Your house is burned, your property is seized, you're refugees, exiled from your own island. You'll never live in Corsica again. Your childhood dream of being a Corsican hero is dead. You're 23 years old. You're a refugee. Your family is destitute, living on charity in France. And you're just a captain in the artillery, with no prospects and no patron. But you're in the right place at the right time, because France is descending into absolute chaos, and chaos is exactly what you need. France in 1793 is a nightmare. The revolution has turned radical. The king has been executed. The reign of terror has begun. Thousands are being guillotined. The country is at war with half of Europe. Armies are being razed and destroyed. Generals are being promoted one day and executed the next. You're sent to deal with a crisis in Toulon. The city has rebelled against the revolutionary government and invited British and Spanish forces to occupy it. The Republic needs to take it back. You're just a captain, but you're good at artillery and you have ideas. You arrive and immediately see what needs to be done. The senior officers are incompetent, still thinking in old-fashioned terms. You propose a plan. Capture the forts overlooking the harbour. Place artillery there. Make it impossible for the British ships to stay. Force them to evacuate. Then the city falls. It's a good plan. It works. You execute it brilliantly. You're wounded during the assault, a bayonet wound to the thigh, but you keep going. The British evacuate. Toulon falls. The Republic is grateful. You're promoted to Brigadier General at 24. In one operation, you've jumped from captain to general. This should feel amazing. But it doesn't, because this is the terror. Being noticed is dangerous. Being successful is dangerous. The government is paranoid and murderous. Still, you're a general now. You're given a command. You're starting to get noticed by the political powers in Paris. You're writing military plans, thinking strategically about how to win the wars France is fighting. Then, in July 1794, everything almost ends. The radical leader Robespierre, the architect of the terror, is overthrown and executed. The politics shift, and you, who had some connections to Robespierre's faction, are arrested. You're thrown in prison. You're facing possible execution. The same government that promoted you is now ready to kill you because the political wind's changed. This is the French Revolution. Loyalty means nothing. Ideology means nothing. It's all about who's in power today and whether you're on their side. You're released after 2 weeks, but you're damaged. You're under suspicion. Your career stalls. You're assigned to command infantry in the Vendée, fighting rebels in western France. You refuse. Infantry isn't your specialty. It's also a miserable posting fighting French civilians in a brutal counterinsurgency. You're put on inactive status, essentially unemployed. For months, you're in Paris, broke, angry, watching your career slip away. You're 25 years old. You've been a general. Now you're nothing. You're living on half pay. You can barely afford to eat. You're thinking about leaving the army, maybe going to Turkey to offer your services to the Sultan. Anything to escape this situation. Then, in October 1795, Paris explodes. Royalist rebels rise up against the government. They're marching on the Tuileries Palace. The government is panicking. They need someone to suppress the rebellion quickly and brutally. Paul Barras, one of the leaders of the government, remembers you. The artillery expert from Toulon. He gives you command of the troops defending the government. You have hours to save the Republic. You do what you do best. You bring in artillery. You load the cannons with grape shot, basically turning them into giant shotguns. When the rebels attack, you don't hesitate. You fire into the crowd. Hundreds die. The rebellion collapses. You've just saved the government by massacring French citizens in the streets of Paris. This should haunt you. It probably does. But it also makes you. Barras is grateful. The government is grateful. You're not just a general again. You're a hero. You're the man who saved the Republic. And you meet Josephine. She's a widow, 6 years older than you, with 2 children. She was married to a general who was guillotined during the Terror. She's beautiful, sophisticated, and well-connected. Everything you're not. She moves in high society. She knows everyone. She's charming and graceful. You fall completely in love, obsessively. You write her dozens of letters, passionate and desperate. You're not smooth. You're intense and awkward. But somehow it works. She marries you in March 1796. There are problems, though. She doesn't love you. Not really. Not the way you love her. She's marrying you because you're a rising general with prospects. You're marrying her because you're desperately lonely, and she represents everything you never had. Acceptance, class, French sophistication. 2 days after your wedding, you leave to take command of the army of Italy. The government is sending you to fight the Austrians. It's a bad posting. The army is starving, unpaid, poorly equipped, and demoralised. The Austrians and their allies control northern Italy. You're expected to keep them busy while the main French armies fight in Germany. But you have different plans. You're not going to just keep the enemy busy. You're going to win. You're going to conquer Italy. You're going to make a name for yourself. Because you understand something fundamental about your situation. In revolutionary France, military success is the only reliable path to power. Everything else, politics, ideology, connections, can disappear overnight. But victories make you untouchable. You arrive in Italy in March 1796. You're 26 years old. You're short, maybe 5'6", skinny, pale from long winters in Paris, and you look younger than your age. Your soldiers take one look at you and laugh. Your soldiers call you the little corporal, half mockingly. Some think you got this command through political connections. Your generals are older, grizzled veterans with scars and decades of experience. They don't respect you. They think you're a boy playing soldier. The army itself is a mess. Your soldiers haven't been paid in months. Their uniforms are in rags. They're starving. Boots are falling apart. Morale is on the floor. They're supposed to fight the professional Austrian army and the Piedmontese forces. It seems impossible. Your first order of business is to change everything. You give a speech to the army. You stand on a box so they can see you properly. You tell them you're going to lead them to the richest plains in the world. Down there in the Po Valley are wealthy cities. Milan, Turin, Venice. Cities full of gold, art, food, wine. You tell them you're going to give them glory, honour and plunder. You're going to make them conquerors. You're going to make them rich. It's not subtle. It's pure bribery. But it works. Because these men don't care about revolutionary ideology or grand strategy. They care about surviving and maybe improving their lot. You're offering them both. Then you attack. You move fast, faster than anyone expects. You don't wait for supplies or reinforcements. You strike before the enemy is ready. You use artillery brilliantly, concentrating your guns at key points, smashing enemy positions. You use manoeuvre, sending columns to threaten flanks and rear areas, forcing the enemy to retreat or be surrounded. You concentrate your forces at decisive points, overwhelming the enemy where it matters while leaving other sectors lightly held. You separate the Austrian army from the Piedmontese army, driving a wedge between them before they can combine. Then you defeat them one by one. First the Piedmontese, battle after battle. Montenotte on April 12th, Millesimo on April 13th, Mondovi on April 21st. Within weeks you've won battles that people thought were impossible. You forced Piedmont to surrender. You force Piedmont to make peace. Then you turn on the Austrians. You chase them across northern Italy. You win battle after battle. Montenotte, Lodi, Castiglione, Arcole, Rivoli. These names will become legendary. You're not just winning, you're dominating. Your soldiers love you now. You've delivered on your promises. They're eating better. They're winning. They're looting the richest cities in Italy. You're distributing plunder, keeping them happy, keeping them loyal to you personally. But you're also doing something more important. You're sending money back to Paris. Lots of money. Gold, art, plunder from Italian cities. The government in Paris is broke. They're desperate for cash. And you're providing it. This makes you valuable. This makes you protected. You're also becoming famous. Your victories are being celebrated in Paris. People are reading about you in newspapers. You're becoming a public figure. At 27 years old, you're one of the most famous men in France. But there are problems. You're married to Josephine, and she's not with you. She's in Paris, having affairs. Everyone knows except you at first. When you find out, you're devastated. You write her heartbroken letters. She writes back with excuses and deflections. You're in Italy winning battles and crying over your wife who doesn't love you. Your family hates Josephine. Your mother, Letizia, especially. She sees Josephine as a scheming older woman taking advantage of her son. Your siblings complain that Josephine is manipulating you. They want you to divorce her, but you can't. You're too in love, or too proud to admit failure, or too afraid of being alone again. You spend 1796 and 1797 conquering northern Italy. You defeat 5 Austrian armies. You force Austria to make peace. You've created French satellite republics in Italy. You've sent millions in gold back to France. You're a national hero. You return to Paris in December 1797. You're 28 years old. You're the most successful general France has. The government honours you. The public adores you. You're invited to the best salons. Intellectuals want to meet you. Women throw themselves at you. But you're not satisfied because you understand something that terrifies you. In revolutionary France, today's hero is tomorrow's suspect. The government is weak and unstable. The politicians are corrupt and divided. There will be more coups, more purges, more opportunities. And if you're not careful, you could end up like so many generals before you. Arrested, tried, executed. You need to stay valuable. You need to stay visible but not threatening. You need another military campaign. So you propose something audacious. Invade Egypt. The idea is strategic. Egypt is nominally part of the Ottoman Empire but effectively controlled by the Mamluks. Taking Egypt would threaten British trade routes to India. It would give France a foothold in the East. It would be a glorious adventure. The real reason is simpler. You need to be away from Paris. You need to keep winning battles. And you need to be somewhere the politicians can't easily reach you. The government approves. They're probably happy to send you away. You're too popular, too successful, too dangerous. Letting you go to Egypt removes you from French politics. If you win, great. If you lose, well, you're far away. You sail in May 1798 with an army of 30,000 men and a fleet of ships. You also bring scientists, scholars, artists. You're not just conquering Egypt. You're going to study it, document it, bring back knowledge. This is part genuine intellectual curiosity and part propaganda. You're styling yourself as the enlightened conqueror, not just a warlord. You land in Egypt in July. It's hot, brutally hot. Your soldiers are suffering. They're French. They're used to temperate climates. Egypt in summer is an oven. They're running out of water. They're getting sick. They're complaining. You push forward anyway. You march to Cairo. You fight the Mamluks at the Battle of the Pyramids. You win, crushing the Mamluk cavalry with disciplined infantry squares and artillery. You occupy Cairo. You're now the master of Egypt. For a moment it seems like success. You're ruler of an ancient land. You're posing in front of pyramids. You're issuing proclamations. You're trying to win over the Egyptian population by respecting Islam and local customs. But then everything goes wrong. The British Navy, commanded by Admiral Nelson, finds your fleet anchored in Aboukir Bay. Nelson attacks and destroys it. Almost your entire fleet is sunk or captured. You're cut off. You can't get reinforcements. You can't get supplies. You can't even get letters from France reliably. You're stuck in Egypt with 30,000 men and no way home. You try to make the best of it. You invade Syria, trying to expand your position, maybe march to India. But the campaign fails. You besiege the fortress of Acre. It holds out. Your soldiers get sick from plague. Thousands die. You're forced to retreat back to Egypt. You're 29 years old. You're stuck in Egypt. Your army is dying of disease. You have no fleet. And back in France, the government is collapsing without you there to prop it up. In August 1799, you make a decision. You abandon your army. You take a few ships that manage to evade the British blockade, and you sail back to France with a handful of officers. You leave your soldiers behind, stranded in Egypt under the command of General Kleber. This is shameful. You're abandoning thousands of men. But you rationalise it. France needs you more than Egypt does. The government is weak. Enemies are closing in. If you don't act now, you'll lose everything. You arrive in France in October 1799. The political situation is exactly as bad as you feared. The government, the Directory, is corrupt and hated. France is losing wars again. The economy is collapsing. People are desperate for stability. You're approached by conspirators. They want to overthrow the Directory and create a new government. They need a general, someone with military prestige and popular support. They need you. You join the plot. On November 9th, 1799, you and your co-conspirators stage a coup. It's messy. You're supposed to give a speech to the legislature, convincing them to dissolve the Directory. But you're not a good public speaker. You get nervous. You stammer. The deputies shout at you, accuse you of being a tyrant. Your brother Lucian, who's president of the legislature, saves you. He calls in soldiers. They clear the chamber with bayonets. The deputies flee. The coup succeeds through force, not eloquence. You're now one of 3 consuls ruling France. Except within months, you've outmaneuvered the other 2. You become first consul. You have almost total power. You're 30 years old. You've gone from exiled Corsican refugee to effective dictator of France in 10 years. You tell yourself you're saving France. And maybe you are. You stabilise the currency. You reform the government. You create the Napoleonic Code, a system of laws that will influence legal systems worldwide. You make peace with the Catholic Church. You reopen schools. You rebuild infrastructure. You're brilliant at administration. You work constantly. 18, 20-hour days. You read reports, make decisions, dictate letters. You have an incredible memory. You can recall details of battles, troop movements, budgets, laws. Your mind never stops. But you're also becoming autocratic. You silence critics. You control the press. You exile opponents. You're creating a police state, justifying it as necessary for stability. And you're not done with war. Austria and Britain are still fighting France. In 1800, you cross the Alps into Italy again. You win another decisive victory at Marengo. You force Austria to make peace again. You're a hero again. The French people love you. You've brought stability and glory. In 1802, you're made consul for life. In 1804, you crown yourself Emperor of the French. Emperor! You, the little Corsican boy who was mocked at school. You, whose family fled Corsica as refugees. You're now Emperor Napoleon I. You design your own coronation. You bring the Pope to Paris to legitimize it. But when the moment comes to be crowned, you take the crown from the Pope and place it on your own head. You're making a statement. Your power comes from yourself, from your victories, not from God or tradition. You're 35 years old. You've achieved something impossible. But the thing about reaching the top is there's nowhere to go but down. As emperor, you're at war constantly. Austria, Russia, Prussia, Britain. They all want you gone. They fear French power. They fear revolutionary ideas spreading. They fear you. You win incredible victories. Austerlitz in 1805, where you crush the combined Russian and Austrian armies. Jena in 1806, where you destroy the Prussian army. You're the greatest military commander in Europe, maybe the greatest since Alexander. But each victory creates new enemies. Each conquered territory creates new responsibilities. You're trying to control all of Europe. You create kingdoms for your brothers. You marry your sisters to foreign rulers. You're building a Bonaparte dynasty. But your family is a disaster. Your brothers are incompetent rulers. Joseph in Spain is hopeless. Louis in Holland refuses to follow your orders. Jerome is a playboy. Your sisters are scheming. Your mother keeps warning you that it's all going to fall apart. Nobody loves you the way you want them to. Nobody is loyal the way you need them to be. Josephine hasn't given you a son. You're an emperor, but you have no heir. This is a crisis. You need a legitimate dynasty. So in 1809, you divorce Josephine. It destroys you emotionally. You still love her, but you need an heir more than you need her. You marry Marie-Louise, daughter of the Austrian emperor. She's 18. You're 40. She's a Habsburg princess from one of the oldest royal families in Europe. You're hoping this marriage will legitimize your rule, make you acceptable to the old monarchies. She gives you a son in 1811. Napoleon II, the King of Rome. You're ecstatic. You finally have an heir. You've created a dynasty. But Europe won't leave you alone. They keep forming coalitions against you. Britain is funding your enemies. Russia breaks its alliance with you. In 1812, you decide to invade Russia. This is the beginning of the end. You assemble the largest army ever seen in Europe. Over 600,000 men, French, Italians, Germans, Poles, Dutch, Swiss. You're pulling soldiers from every corner of your empire and allied states. Supply wagons stretch for hundreds of kilometers. You're bringing everything you think you'll need. Food, ammunition, artillery, medical supplies. But it's never enough. It can never be enough for an army this size moving through hostile territory. You march into Russia in June 1812. You're supremely confident. You've beaten every European army. You've won dozens of battles. Why should Russia be different? You're planning to destroy the Russian army in 1 or 2 decisive battles near the border, force the Tsar to negotiate and be home before winter. At first, it seems to work. You cross the Niemen River. The Russians retreat. You keep advancing, always advancing. The Russian countryside rolls away endlessly. Forests, fields, small villages. It all looks the same. Your soldiers start getting tired. The heat is brutal. This is a Russian summer, surprisingly hot. Men are collapsing from heat exhaustion. Horses are dying. Supply wagons are breaking down. You win battles when you catch the Russians. Smolensk in August is a brutal fight. The city burns. Thousands die. But the Russian army escapes. They won't give you the decisive engagement you want. Their commander Kutuzov is old and cunning. He knows he can't beat you in open battle, so he just keeps retreating, burning everything as they go. Scorched earth, no food, no shelter, nothing for your army to live on. Your army is shrinking, not from battles but from attrition. Men are getting sick, dysentery, typhus, exhaustion. They're deserting. They're straggling behind, unable to keep up with the gruelling pace. Supply lines are stretched impossibly thin. Cossacks are raiding your rear areas, capturing supply wagons, killing stragglers. By the time you approach Moscow in September, your 600,000-man army is down to maybe 130,000 combat-ready soldiers. The rest are dead, sick, captured, or scattered across hundreds of kilometres of Russian wasteland. You fight one more major battle at Borodino, just west of Moscow. It's one of the bloodiest battles of your career. 70,000 casualties in a single day. Both sides hammer each other with artillery and mass infantry charges. It's brutal, mindless. The Russians withdraw, but you've won nothing but corpses. You reach Moscow in September. You expect the Russians to surrender. You're in their ancient capital. This should end the war. Instead, Moscow burns. Probably the Russians set the fires deliberately. Maybe your soldiers looting with torches. The city is destroyed. 3/4 of Moscow burns to the ground. There's no food, no shelter, just ruins and ash. You're stuck in the smoking ruins with winter approaching. You wait for a month, hoping for a peace. Offer that never comes. The Tsar won't negotiate. He's willing to let Moscow burn, willing to sacrifice everything, as long as you're destroyed in the process. You realize you have to retreat. In October, you begin the long march back, and Russia's winter closes in. The retreat is hell. Pure hell. At first it's just cold, then it gets colder, then it becomes the coldest winter in decades. Temperatures drop to 20, 30, 40 degrees below zero. Your soldiers are starving. They're freezing. They're dying by the thousands every single day. The army disintegrates as an organised force. Men abandon their units, trying to survive any way they can. They steal from each other. They kill for a crust of bread. Officers lose control. Discipline collapses. It becomes every man for himself. The road back is littered with frozen corpses, thousands and thousands of bodies, men who sat down to rest and never got up, horses dead in the snow, abandoned wagons, discarded weapons. The Cossacks harry you constantly, picking off stragglers, attacking the columns. The Russian regular army follows at a distance, never committing to a major battle, just watching you die slowly. You reach the Berezina River in late November. The Russians have destroyed the bridges. The river is partially frozen, but not enough to walk across. The ice breaks under weight. You're trapped with the Russian army closing in from multiple directions. Your engineers work in freezing water, building pontoon bridges under fire. It's miraculous they succeed. Thousands cross the bridges. Thousands more are left behind, killed or captured when the Russian army arrives. By the time you reach Poland in December, your army of 600,000 is reduced to fewer than 40,000 combat-effective soldiers. It's the greatest military disaster in modern history. You abandon the army again. Just like in Egypt, you race back to Paris in a sleigh, leaving your soldiers to their fate. You need to control the narrative. You need to raise a new army. You need to survive this. You do survive somehow. You raise another army. You fight Austria, Russia, and Prussia again in 1813. You win some battles, but you're outnumbered. Your enemies have learned from you. They've adopted your tactics, and they have more men, more resources. In October 1813, you're defeated at Leipzig, the Battle of Nations. It's a crushing defeat. You're forced to retreat back to France. The Allies invade France in 1814. You fight desperately, winning small victories, but you can't stop them. Paris falls. Your marshals, the men who fought with you for years, tell you it's over. They want peace. In April 1814 you abdicate. You're sent into exile on Elba, a tiny island off the coast of Italy. You're given sovereignty over Elba, a mockery of an empire. You're 44 years old. Your empire is gone. You spend months on Elba, playing at being emperor of a tiny island. You're bored. You're angry. You're planning. Because you hear that France isn't happy. The restored Bourbon King Louis XVIII is unpopular. People miss you. They miss glory. In March 1815, you escape Elba. You land in France with 1,000 men. It's insane. It's brilliant. As you march north, soldiers sent to arrest you join you instead. Whole regiments defect. By the time you reach Paris, you have an army again. Louis XVIII flees. You're emperor again. The 100 Days, they'll call it. One last chance, but Europe won't allow it. They declare you an outlaw. They raise armies to crush you. You mobilise France for war again. You march to Belgium to attack the British and Prussian armies before they can combine. On June 18th, 1815, you fight the Duke of Wellington at Waterloo. It's close, brutally close. But the Prussians arrive in time to reinforce Wellington. Your army breaks. You lose. This time, there's no mercy. The British exile you to St. Helena, a volcanic rock in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. 1,600 kilometres from the nearest land. There's no escaping from St. Helena. You arrive in October 1815. You're 46 years old. You'll live for less than 6 more years, and they'll be the worst years of your life. St. Helena is a prison. You're guarded by British soldiers. You live in a damp house called Longwood. It's mouldy, rat-infested, and miserable. The British governor, Hudson Lowe, treats you like a prisoner, not like an emperor. He refuses to call you emperor. He calls you General Bonaparte. You're humiliated daily. You're bored. You're sick. The climate is terrible. You have nothing to do. You dictate your memoirs, trying to control how history will remember you. You replay your battles, your decisions, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. Your health deteriorates. You're gaining weight from inactivity. You have stomach pain constantly. You're probably developing stomach cancer, the same disease that killed your father. Your companions on the island are mostly loyal, but they're suffering too. Some leave, some die. You're watching your little court disintegrate. You argue with Lowe about everything, about money, about freedom of movement, about basic dignity. You're alone. Marie Louise and your son are in Austria, hostages basically. You'll never see them again. Josephine is dead, died in 1814, right after you were first exiled. Your mother is still alive, but she's in Rome. Your siblings are scattered across Europe, most of them in exile too. You're 47, 48, 49. You're deteriorating. The stomach pain gets worse. You can barely eat. You're vomiting constantly. You're wasting away. In May 1821, you're dying. Your companions gather around your bed. You dictate a will. You give final instructions. You talk about France, about your son, about glory. On May 5th, 1821, you die. You're 51 years old. The official cause is stomach cancer, though some will claim you were poisoned. Either way, you're dead. On a rock in the Atlantic, surrounded by just a handful of loyalists, thousands of kilometres from France, from glory, from power, they bury you on St. Helena. It'll be 19 years before your body's returned to France and placed in a grand tomb in Paris. So let's talk about why being Napoleon Bonaparte sucked. Yes, you were emperor. Yes, you were one of the most powerful men in history. But look at what it cost. You were never accepted. Not really. The French aristocrats always saw you as an upstart. The old monarchies never accepted you as legitimate. You were always the Corsican outsider who got lucky. You were constantly at war. From 1796 to 1815, with brief pauses, you were fighting. Hundreds of battles, millions dead. Your soldiers worshipped you, but you sent them to die in Russia, in Spain, in Egypt, in Germany. How many ghosts followed you? You had no real friends. Josephine didn't love you. Marie-Louise abandoned you when you fell. Your siblings used you. Your marshals betrayed you when things got hard. Who could you trust? Nobody. You were alone at the top. You worked yourself to death. 18 20-hour days. Never resting. Never relaxing. Always another battle, another reform, another crisis. You barely slept. You ate poorly. You ruined your health for power that you couldn't keep. You lost everything twice. First exile to Elba, then exile to St. Helena. You went from emperor of most of Europe to prisoner on a rock. You died alone, in pain, surrounded by the wreckage of your dreams. Your son never ruled. Napoleon II lived as a prisoner in Austria. He died at 21 of tuberculosis, never having ruled anything. Your dynasty, your great project died with him, and your legacy. It's complicated. You're remembered as a military genius, yes, but also as a dictator, a warmonger, someone whose ambition killed millions. France remembers you with pride and shame. Europe remembers you as the enemy. You came from nothing. You rose to everything, and you lost it all. Not once, but twice. You died in exile, betrayed, alone and sick. You were brilliant. You were visionary. You reformed law, education and government in ways that lasted centuries. You were also ruthless, autocratic, and willing to sacrifice anything and anyone for glory. Being Napoleon meant living with impossible contradictions. You were the son of the revolution who crowned himself emperor. You were the champion of merit who created a new nobility. You were the liberator who became a conqueror. You were the genius who made catastrophic mistakes. You were too smart to be satisfied with ordinary life, but not wise enough to know when to stop. You achieved more than almost anyone in history, but it was never enough. There was always another enemy, another kingdom, another war. You died at 51, young by modern standards, but you packed more into those years than most people could in 10 lifetimes. You went from refugee to emperor. You conquered Europe. You created laws that still govern nations. You changed history, but you died alone on a rock in pain with only a handful of loyalists, far from everything you loved. Your empire was gone. Your family was scattered. Your son was a prisoner. Your name was becoming a legend, but you were dying in exile. So yeah, being Napoleon Bonaparte sucked. Not because you didn't achieve greatness, you did, but because greatness cost you everything. Your health, your happiness, your peace, your life. You wanted to be remembered. You wanted glory. You wanted to prove that a Corsican refugee could become greater than kings, and you did prove it. But the price was paid in full, in blood, in loneliness, in pain, in exile. The boy who was mocked at French military school became Emperor of France. The refugee became a legend. The outsider became the most powerful man in Europe, but he died alone, far from home, betrayed and broken. That's Napoleon. That's the reality behind the myth, brilliant and tragic, triumphant and doomed, the greatest success story and the greatest failure story wrapped into one life. He changed the world, but the world destroyed him in return.